Now, I keep telling you to put vermouth in your cocktails, so I thought it was about time that we had a little chat about what vermouth actually is and why you probably need a bottle, both for cocktails and because it's delicious just to drink on the rocks. So I've invited in my good friend, fellow Scot and wine guru, Sasha, to take us through what vermouth is.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for coming in. Now, I obviously invited you in because wine is your thing.
Yep.
Because vermouth is a wine.
Yes, it is. So essentially, vermouth is defined as a wine base, so a grapefruit base. It's fortified and then it's infused or macerated with different botanicals. European Union laws define it as having to have wormwood in it.
I guess we can get a little bit technical because some of the things that we have on here are not technically vermouth because they don't have wormwood.
Yeah.
But basically what we're talking about here is aromatised and fortified wine.
Yeah.
So what exactly is this wormwood?
So wormwood is a species of plants from the Artemis family.
And is it a bit of a bitter flavour?
Yeah, it's got quite a bitter flavour.
Cool.
Yeah.
Because I guess that's what people kind of don't really think about with vermouth. Yes, there is sugar in there, so there is a sweetness to it. But good vermouth should be balanced. There's kind of a bittersweet flavour going on, which is one of the reasons why it's such a good addition to cocktails, because it basically packs in all of these different flavours and layers and nuances just by the addition of this one ingredient. And I think though, is the wormwood actually where it gets its name as well?
Yeah, so it's taken from the German for wormwood, which is Vermut, and then the French translation turns into vermouth, which is where we get the category's name.
Yeah. So it is a good thing to have in your fridge. Obviously, usual wine when you open it only lasts a couple of days, whereas this stuff will last up to a month if you keep it refrigerated because of that higher alcohol and sugar content. So we keep saying botanicals.
Yes.
What exactly is that?
So botanicals, we got different herbs, spices, vegetational items from around the different regions.
It was originally medicinal, as much as we now obviously use it more for its alcoholic properties. Technically, was the herbs and barks and spices that were supposed to be helping your tummy.
Yeah, essentially to get your gastric juices flowing, to prepare your stomach for your meal. They're also known for the wines that they put quinine in would help ward off malaria.
So it's really good for your health to be drinking a lot of this stuff. So I guess it's pretty cool because they show, like, they vary quite a lot depending where they come from. I think I've mentioned in the Martini episode, I used a local Australian vermouth because quite a lot of producers have started doing that as well. So for instance, this guy is from Adelaide Hills. It's a rosé vermouth, which is quite an interesting style. And it uses heaps of native botanicals. So you've got things like wattle seed and finger lime and native thyme that you can only get in Australia. So it's a really good expression of terroir, which is also something that we talk about both with wine, and I've spoken about it with tequila. It kind of applies to gin as well, where you're using botanicals that are from the area that the gin is made. And I guess it's just something to think about if you're a little bit overwhelmed by a certain category of spirit or vermouth or wine. You know, if it's from the local area, then it's probably going to be something that you want to drink while you're there. Obviously, we were saying that vermouth is wine. I think usually people kind of know it from maybe using a tiny little dash in cocktails like a martini or something, but you can just drink it on the rocks.
Yeah, you can definitely drink it on the rocks. And it depends what style you like as well, because some of them are very dry and herbaceous, and some of them are much richer and sweeter and spicy. So they can go on the rocks with like a little bit of orange and olive, like we do the Casa Mariol, or you can add in a little splash of soda and make it a longer drink. Maybe that would be nice with something like the Dolin.
Yeah, I really like actually Cocchi, Americano and tonic, because it's got that real bittersweet thing that tonic has as well. So in summer, that with a big wedge of orange, almost like as a spritz style drink, is a really good kind of lower alcohol alternative to a gin and tonic. Like, there's quite a big trend for people who want to drink something fun, but they don't want, you know, like to be drinking 40% alcohol all the time. Yeah. So these all sit around generally sort of like 15 to
about 20.
Yes.
Is average for that.
So a little bit more than wine, but you use them in smaller quantities. And then so obviously the martini is kind of the most famous of the vermouth cocktails. I just did a little episode where we used a dry one and then also one of these Blanco ones, which are slightly sweeter, so kind of rounds it out a bit more. I always think it's quite interesting in Negronis as well. People tend to think of the gin as having the biggest impact on the flavour, but actually the vermouth can be massive.
Yeah.
Something like Cocchi de Tornio, that one's actually got quite a lot of vanilla in it, doesn't it?
Yes, that's the character that's most known for.
Yeah.
So it got much more sort of aromatic and sweet spices to it, that one, as well as being much richer.
Yeah, so it's going to be a richer and sweeter Negroni, almost more of a kind of digestif style Negroni if you're trying to have something after your dinner. So obviously we've kind of got these arranged in a bit of a lightest to heaviest. Would you mind chatting us through the various styles?
Yeah, most of these wines are made with grapes that are reasonably neutral, which is a great base for when you're going to add in 100 or so different botanicals. And you can see in the different range of colours that you've got that the different botanicals can offer quite a lot of different colour and a lot of different flavours.
Like for instance, this one is actually made with the same grape as that one, right?
Yeah.
But then they just add different things to it. So it's not like this one's made from a red grape and this one's made from a white grape. It's that they have black walnuts.
Yes, so I think it's green walnuts in this one.
Green walnuts.
And then about 160 other botanicals that are local to the Barcelona area. And yeah, so Macabeo, also known as Jura, is the grape for this and this.
So the dry vermouth at the end there, the Dolin, might have a little taste of that one, is the one, this is a style of vermouth that you'd be most likely to use in like a dry martini. It is, as the name suggests, quite dry. There's less sugar in it than most of the other vermouths. I guess the flavours tend towards kind of like a herbal...
More herbal and fresh, quite sort of alpine style rather than rich and spicy.
And it actually smells probably the most like actual wine. I know that sounds silly, but I guess there's not as many other like strong kind of raisiny or anything like that.
It's very delicate and fresh.
So obviously this would be lovely on the rocks, as I said, in a dry martini, but it also makes a really good spritzer, like if you put it with soda and a big slice of lemon in the summer, if you're looking for something a little bit lower in alcohol, that is a delicious drink as well. And then the next one along is a really good example of like a trend that's been happening in a lot of younger wine industries where they've started making vermouth as well. So Australia is a great example, and they use stuff that's native to where they're actually producing the vermouth. So obviously we had a little chat about these ones being the same grape varietal but different colours because of what's put in them. So then we brought out these two.
The Lillets, these quinquinas are from the Bordeaux area, and as I spoke about the Casa Mariol using grapes that are abundant in the region that they're grown in, the Lillet uses for the white wines Sauvignon, Blanc and Semillon, and then for the Rouge they use Cabernet and Merlot. So those are the principal grapes of that area.
So will the grape bases then have a pretty big impact on the flavour of these two?
Yeah, so you've got higher quality grapes which are more aromatic and are more often seen as wines in their own right. So the Sauvignon Blanc for sure gives this a much fresher, aromatic and herbaceous character, and the Cabernet and the Merlot in here you get more sort of berry flavours like strawberry, raspberry, blackcurrant, and it's a little bit more elegant than something that's got more botanicals added to it. Americano, sometimes seen as a subcategory of quinquina. It takes its name not from America, but more from amar, which is bitter. So they add extra gentian.
It's one of my favourite cocktail ingredients because in this one product that you have to add in, you get bitter and you get sweet and you get herbal and you get citrusy, and so it's just basically a bit of a cheater's way to just pack a load of flavour into a cocktail. So that one is starting to get into the realms of things that you can use with darker spirits as well, because it's got like quite an orangey kind of characteristic to it.
A bit more sort of bitter, orange, zesty. Sweet.
Yeah, so I think I really like it using it with rum, like a kind of plain and Negroni can be really good. And then this guy, the Adelaide Hills Rosé Vermouth, is quite an interesting one to talk about. The fact that stuff coming out of Australia and America is a little bit less constrained by the technical rules that the kind of Europeans have, obviously just because of that history.
So it's 40% Australian botanicals and then 60% Tornio botanicals.
So it's kind of following in that tradition, but doing a little Australian twist.
Yes.
I guess we've already spoken about this one, but this is the one that we're having on the rocks. It's one of my favorites just to drink like that as an aperitif. Again, getting more into quite a sweet sort of almost caramelly flavours.
Sweet caramel, and it's really easy to drink.
Yeah, but it is quite light in body, unlike the ones further down the line here. So it's not
spicy.
And not as syrupy, I guess. So before dinner and with those herbal notes, I think it still works really well. We're now getting into the kind of range of ones that we might use in the other classic cocktail that everyone kind of knows vermouth for, which is the Negroni.
The Cocchi de Torino and the Antica formula both have added vanilla, which gives them that slightly richer, sweeter element, and they really pick it up a bit in spiciness.
Yeah, I guess when you're making a Negroni, that's something to bear in mind. If you want something that's a bit sweeter and spicier and richer, maybe more of an after-dinner digestif, I would look at either the Antica or the Cocchi. Whereas if you're having more of an aperitif Negroni, then the Casa Mariol works really well for me.
Yeah.
So this one, the Antica, is like much browner, and quite viscous. Look at the legs on that one.
This one's it's full of smells like clove and cardamom, cinnamon.
Yeah, and it's like vanilla, and basically it's a bit of a pudding.
This is the vermouth that first sort of opened my eyes to the world of vermouth, and it was what featured in the first Negroni that I ever had.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The story of Sasha. And then the last little guy, the Punt, he's a bit of an interesting one.
He is, so 1.5 I think it is.
Yeah.
It's a real sort of balance between sweet and bitter.
Yeah, it actually falls into the category of a bittered vermouth. So obviously bitters themselves are a whole other category that we'll probably have to look at some point. Things like Campari or Montenegro, Amaro Nannino. This one is kind of like if they had a baby with the vermouth here. So again, used in a lot of classic cocktails. Again, usually with darker spirits, like getting into more of your whiskies and things, Manhattan variations. We'll use this one. And it's got that really nice bittersweet that just is what in a cocktail keeps you wanting to come back for more. I think it's all about that balance, as I always say. So in your professional opinion, if someone hasn't had any vermouth in their fridge before and they're going to rush out after seeing us waxing lyrical about it and buy some, what would you recommend looking for?
If someone's completely unfamiliar to the category, I'd recommend getting something like the Casa Mariol. It's just got that little bit more sweetness, and then you start to get used to all the different botanicals that are used. And then to cover all bases, I would pick something like the Dolin Dry and the Antica formula.
And obviously that makes sense because the Dolin Dry works well with lighter spirits, things like gin and vodka, if you're using it in cocktails. And then the Antica formula is sort of robust enough to stand up to like your whiskies and your rums and things. So you're sort of covering all the spectrum there. Obviously, depending where you're watching from, you might not be able to get your hands on some of these. We have sort of, we're pretty lucky in where we work, we've got quite a big range. But most of the bigger brands, things like Martini and Cinzano, will have a dry and a Bianco and a sweet. So just get one of each, and they all will quite often do little half bottles. So if you are using it at home, it's not gonna oxidize and sit in your fridge for too long. You just have to drink that many martinis in a month. And that's a good place to start if you've never tried before. They're generally a little bit cheaper than some of the sort of more boutique brands. Still delicious and still do absolutely everything that you would want them to in classic cocktails or on the rocks.
The fortified wine category is such an exciting category, and the vermouths are just expanding at an amazing rate. It feels like there's a new one every single day. It's a really cool way to interplay between the wine world and the spirits world as well.
So whether or not you want to just sip it on ice or actually have a bit of a play in some cocktails, you should definitely get some in your fridge.